Good morning. Uh, I want to talk about this touchy subject this morning. You've been watching the news and this, that, and the other about uh, tearing down the monuments and slavery, the past and history. And there's a lot of good books out on it. I've got one right here. Let me reach and get it. Now, this one here tells a story about basically, I don't know if we can get a good view of it. It's got the generals in it on both sides. It's got their political views. It's got everything you want to imagine about the Civil War. A lot of pictures in it. It's got Robert E. Lee here. It tells about him. And it tells just about everything you want to about everybody. And we honored a lot of the soldiers, generals, are on both sides. I believe Ulysses S. Grant was a Southern general, became a Northern president, I believe, and he's on a $50 bill. So history's our history. But not getting off the subject too much, but if you had another way of looking at things, it's like a honeybee that goes from flower to flower and it spreads the nectar. One was getting something off of both sides. So who was the slave owner and who was the slave from a honeybee to a plant? Now, they're both codependent on one another. And that's what the South was all about. They were codependent on their slaves. There were some horrors done in the slave market and the slave trade. There was horrors done in the modern day. Equal rights. I remember the 60s. I still believe that human beings are human beings. There's no difference in us. Like I said, nowadays, I had a, let's go back to the past. I had a grandfather that was on a Northern general. He later became a judge for the Reconstruction of the South. He was a judge in Arkansas. According to my grandmother, she drawed a Northern pension till the day she died, and she died in the late 60s. So she was a young girl during the Civil War. And later on, she married him. He was 57. She was like 18. So she had her own take on the Civil War. She can remember Cantrell and his Raiders, and so on and so forth. But I'm not going to get into that much. But later he was in a Andersonville prison. I believe it was him. But the other grandpa on the southern side, he was a Southern lieutenant or something like that. So I had two grandfathers. One fought for the North, one fought for the South. So therefore, my heritage really could go either way. Now I have grandchildren that have Italian, German, Jewish, English, Irish. And now get down to my great-grandchildren. I have Caucasian grandchildren, got Italian grandchildren, got Jewish grandchildren, Irish grandchildren. I've got what they call black, would be considered black grandchildren. You know, we're all a mixed race, and that's something that people don't want to realize. In your family, if you dig back, where there's the only thoroughbreds or purebreds there was in the world was Adam and Eve. And I believe in the Bible it says Eve was fair and Adam wouldn't. So you can take it from there. Uh, to me, I'm not going to get into too much politics, too much religion. Had a lot to play with it. Uh, I mean, there's a lot of things that, factors. But like I said, if you look on anything, uh, it's codependent on another thing. You've got birds in Africa that picks the ticks and the lice off big animals, and in turn, the animal gets the varmints picked off of it. The big animal, the small animal, gets protection and food from the larger animal. Same way with fish. You have fish that cleans other fish's gills and this, that, and the other, and a protection. You get plants. There's I think it's a sponge that a little fish lives in, and it's like a stingray or whatever, and it lives in this plant, and it gets protection from the plant. And we have bumblebees with flowers that gets nectar from the flower, and spreads the pollen from the plant. It's sort of like codependent on one another. And this really don't have nothing to do with like approving or justifying slavery. It's just showing that things are codependent on other things. Things that we realize and take for granted. Yes, we could have done different. Instead of owning somebody, we could have went over and like we did the Chinese and the Irish. Now, was it any worse or any better than what we did with the Chinese? We brought them over here to build a railroad, and when the railroad was done, the railroad. Now, this is, I believe, this was like the northern people that built this railroad after the Civil War, and they had to ship the Chinese back after the railroad was done. Well, they killed a lot of them during basically explosions. Some said that it was accidental. Some said it was on purpose because they didn't want to pay for the freight sending the Chinese back. So that was horrible. And let's see, on the indentured servants that we had, the Irish that we brought over, the English did. They were indentured servants. Sometimes they were married for a wife, or they were indentured servant for 20 years. There's a deal on one of my grandfathers became what they would call an indentured servant. He had a farm, and he wanted some poles. This is here. I've got it all documented. And he had this other person needed help or whatever on their farms. So what he did is he traded his labor, I believe it was for 2 years, for the poles and the planks or the lumber, to upgrade his farm and build fences and so on and so forth, and house or whatever and all this stuff. So he was an indentured servant for 2 years to this other landowner. Now, according to reading his history and his diary, he left, and his will, he said that was the most horriblest thing he ever did. Indentured himself to that other farmer for 2 years of service. I don't know what went on there. He didn't write much in his diary other than that he wished he hadn't done it, but he did. So what I'm saying, when we get up in the morning and go to work, and you've been there 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, You are an indentured servant, or a slave, if you want to call it, to the system, to the boss, to the job. I know what quite well. I worked for years. I worked 48 years for the federal government. Was I a slave to the federal government? Apparently I was. Served in 2 wars, so apparently I done their bidding. So what I'm getting at, stop and think of your situation. The horrors of the past should stay in the past. But we should learn what they were and go from the future. Like I said, in my background, I've got who married who plumb to the 12th century. Now that's who married who all the way to me, all my bloodline. And on both sides, my mother's side and my father's side. So I knew pretty well where I come from. My mother was Irish, and Dad was what they would call Anglo-Saxon. He had a little let's see, what we call Norway, Sweden, up in the north. Up in the north. They came from Justin land. I think it is Angles and Saxon. They came from like way up north. But anyway, I got who married who, and all the way down to us, me, and then of course to my grandchildren. Now I've got grandchildren that's got. Now I'm gonna go wide spectrum because I've got quite a few grandchildren and great grandchildren. So I've got Italians married in, Jewish. My wife was a Jew, 100% pure Jew. So according to the Jewish law, my children are Jewish. They're not Anglos. They're not Gentiles. They're Jews. Because the bloodline comes from the female, not the male. But anyway. So, but I've got Italians, Jewish. My great great grandchildren has got African American in them. I've got a wide diversity of a bloodline in my family group. And here later, I mean, the later years in life, up until me, there was just, like I said, mainly Anglo-Saxon and Irish, let's say. But after me, like I said, I married a Jew. I believe everybody gets entitled to marry who they love. That was, and then my granddaughter married an African American on one side. Now I've got, and one of them married they stayed in the Caucasian line. But now, do I love one grandchild, they got some Italian blood, or one great grandchild, because I've got them on both sides, with African American and or Anglo-Saxon? No, I love all my grandchildren, and all my great grandchildren, and all my great great grandchildren. I mean, I love all of them. So therefore, but codependent on another human being, you want to stop and think who's the slave and who's the master and who's the owner. Or are they just trying to codependent on one another? I think our history plants a dark subject in a lot of people's minds. Yes, there were some tragedies and horrors probably done on both sides. But now we've got to live with our past. It's like the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust. There's Germans over there, young people, kids, since there's that don't even believe in the Holocaust. They say it never happened. Oh, why do they say that? Well, they've torn down and destroyed all the references to Hitler and his regime. other than the Holocaust Museum over there. But how many people's going to visit that? That's what I'm saying. If we do away with our history, we cannot learn from it. And we're bound to repeat our history if we cannot learn from it. I better shut up, as I say I talk too long. I went about 5 minutes over on this. But think about, like I said, who is, in modern days, who is the slave owner and who is the slave? That's what I'm saying. We get up every morning. I did for 40, 50, 60 years at one place. And I was a slave to it. I worked in a lab, usually in a basement, way in the back. You could say pathology or corner, whatever. You know what I'm saying. Our research assistant, our research person. I climbed up through the ranks. But I was a slave, basically, to a job for years and years and years. And now I'm still a slave to my retirement check, my Social Security check, my neighborhood, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, my children. You're still doing things sometimes that you are forced into doing under one circumstances or the other. So therefore, stop and think, if we cannot codependent on this planet, then we, like I said, we will no longer exist on this planet. The planet's been around for 14.5 billion years. We've only barely a scratch on the planet. There's a lot of species that has went away, come extinct. And if we don't learn to settle our differences in a peaceful and intelligent manner, we will become extinct. And then there's no winner on extinct. There's just, it's like I said, you're dead, you're gone, and whether you're forgotten or not is who wants to remember. Try to remember the good and the bad of history and learn from it. Better let you go, talk too long. Have a great day. Hit the button, push the knob, do the things you're supposed to do. They say, take care and have a great day.